They want Frailty to set you up for the entirety of Tales from the Pizzaplex. That's how I feel. More people need to believe this. We are scooping people. We're scooping people. Hi, I'm Nervous, and today we are going to be doing another episode of the Nervous Breakdown, and we are going to be talking about my latest theory where I solved security breach. I've never been less nervous about anything in my entire life. I am so sure that I did it, and maybe that's conceited or way too confident, but I am telling you, you won't take this away from me. I have major anxiety about just about everything in my life, and I would never in a million years say that I think that I solved something for real if I was not that serious. If you haven't seen the theory, here it is, so go check it out, and then come right back here because I am going to be discussing some of the methodology that I used, really get into some of the comments that were left on the video that made really good points, and other things that I feel bring a little bit extra oomph to the theory. I'll just say it like that. I do my videos once a week, and personally, that has to be the way that I do it because of my anxiety. If I sit on an idea for too long, it's going to disappear into the night. And I had been working on, I won't get too much into, I'll say this in a little bit, but I've been working on some parts of this theory for a while. So the moment that I cracked it, the moment that it made sense to me, I was like, you gotta get this out there. But what we're gonna talk about today are some things that probably would have just been good. Would have been good to be able to add to the theory and all that good stuff. Then at the end, we are going to be doing a live Q&A with my channel members. They are actually seeing this video first, completely unedited. I went live and they were in chat and asked me some questions, so that'll be the end of the video. We will do that. And I'm going to try to do nervous breakdowns in that format going forward if I can. So if you want to be a part of that, then you can join my channel memberships for $1 a month. But otherwise, you can support the channel by liking the video, subscribing to become a part of the nervous system, and leaving your thoughts in the comments below. So without further ado, let's do it. Let's break it down. Maybe I should take a moment to actually explain RemnantPlex theory, which Rytoast and I coined it, which is why Rytoast is back here. Ry's literal toast is back here because they messaged me asking if they could cover the theory, and I said, of course you can. And they were like, what do you call this? What do you call your theory? Have you named your theory? And I said, no, I haven't. And so we collectively came up with RemnantPlex. So thank you. Shout out to Rytoast. So before I really jump into the video and all of my other thoughts on it, I do want to offer you a brief summary of the theory in case it's been a minute since you've watched the video, or you know, it would just help further the conversation along if you had a brief recap, or if you're really one of those people who saw me point to the original video and said to yourself, no, I'm going to watch this instead of going and watching that. I just at least want you to have a basis to work off of. Ultimately, just really boiling this down to its most basic elements. Return to the Pit is an interactive novel that heavily implies, in my opinion at least, the influence Agony has over Oswald. That is my sort of interpretation of the events in Return to the Pit. And in that, there are a pair of bunny ears that when you put them on, they hurt you, they like pinch the side of your head, and then it's like you are overcome with an allegiance to the yellow rabbit. I'll just say it like that. It's a peaceful feeling, you're really on cloud 9, but you are one with specifically the yellow rabbit. So I was applying that logic to the Vanny mask. What if the Vanny mask is run on Agony, and Vanessa putting it on, it sort of locks into her past, her memories, whether they be the most positive or the most negative, and uses those elements of her to keep her under control. Now, the game canon does not ever explicitly mention Agony as a substance at use, so then we move to the substance that is popularly in, at the very least, Sister Location and Pizzeria Simulator, which is Remnant. It's talked about within the Silver Eyes trilogy as well, but it's confirmed in Pizzeria Simulator that what is happening in Sister Location is a collecting of Remnant. So we look at the similarities and the properties of Agony and Remnant, and ultimately I am proposing that Remnant is currently being harvested or implemented in our modern FNAF Pizzaplex, the one that we see in Security Breach. There is a scooping room in the basement. I mean, objectively, you can say that that's not a canon ending, but the room is there. They're showing us the room. The room is there whether what we do with it happens or not. The room is there, okay? So there is literally a scooping room in the basement that nobody has really had an explanation for. If Remnant, and in my opinion, yes, Remnant is capable of being a power source, and it's free. No, there's no government agency charging you for Remnant. And not only does it have this is Remnant in my hand right here, not only does it have the property of being a power source, it's also going to give a lifelike quality to your mascot characters. Well, why would you not implement it? Why would a capitalist venture not use that for profit? I mean, to me, it's clear as day. So if you know the story of Monsters, Inc., they are a town who is completely run on the screams of children, and there are monsters who go into children's bedrooms, collect the screams of the children, and put them in to use, right, to power their city. So my proposition is that Fazbear Entertainment is using Remnant as a power source for the Pizzaplex and to keep its animatronics looking pristine and acting in the most state-of-the-art way. I am not replacing the AI elements of Five Nights at Freddy's, modern Five Nights at Freddy's, but I am adding to it. I am saying it's not the whole story. AI is not the whole story. The other half of the story is Remnant. So that's RemnantPlex theory. Now you're caught up. I do a lot more justification in my actual theory, so I would still encourage you to watch it, but if you haven't, now you have a basis for the rest of our conversation today. So let's converse, shall we? So first, what I want to talk about today is the fact that while this all came to me while I was reading the Return to the Pit interactive novel, there have been parts of this theory stirring around in my head for a long time. One really good example is the short I've got uploaded that is a piece of a dual process theory reaction video that I did many months ago now, I think like 7 months ago as of recording this. When Corey and Connie were talking about the nightmare experiments, they were talking specifically about the idea of harvesting agony, and I said, you know what, that actually sounds like Monsters, Inc.
Agony.
Does anybody else get Monsters, Inc. vibes from that part of this series? Scott Cawthon was watching Pixar's Monsters, Inc. with his kids and was like, that's it. That's what we're doing. We're going full throttle. William Afton is harvesting agony to do experiments on, and an agony in and of itself is a power source. So it just kind of got in my, I go, oh, you know what? That kind of sounds like Monsters, Inc. And the idea of these elements that we have in Five Nights at Freddy's being implemented as a replacement for a battery, basically, right? And it actually explains the idea of the animatronics being more advanced than you would expect those animatronics to be. In my opinion, there are so many things about not just modern FNAF, but even back to Sister Location that make so much more sense when we start viewing Remnant and Agony, however you want to slice and dice it, as power sources that naturally enhance the abilities of the animatronics. I think the moment you start thinking of Remnant in that way specifically, it brings a lot of clarity to me to Sister Location and then also to our modern games. But frankly, I already feel like this discussion is getting a little bit unfocused, so I'm going to circle back around to where I really want to start today, and that is what chronologically happened for me to get all the way to this, because yes, I make a video every week, and yes, it only really took me a week to put all this together, write the script, film it, edit it, and put it out. But there were specific pieces of Security Breach and the Ruin DLC that have been rattling around in my brain for a really long time. When I started looking into theorizing, one of the first things that I said, that is a mystery we're supposed to solve, and people aren't talking about it because they don't even have a potential solution, and I don't even know how important it is to most people, but it's very important to me. And that is that Glamrock Freddy gets real funked up real fast in Security Breach. It's like instantaneous. He goes from being super shiny, sleek, new, all these things, to immediately being dusty and having cracks on his shell. That's a mystery that we have to solve. It's not a question. We have to figure this out, and surely it matters. And I have over time, I have come up with a number of potential solutions, and a lot of them have included like time manipulation in some way or the other. Or I've done I thought, what if Gregory is in the system that he sees the Pizzaplex as a new thing, but slowly is coming out of that. But then I said no, because Glamrock Freddy is the only thing that's getting really dilapidated. There are other things throughout the Pizzaplex that are in disarray, but it's not the whole Pizzaplex that starts, looking really drab and dreary. It's very specifically Glamrock Freddy. What is specific to Glamrock Freddy is the amount of times he has to get in and out of the charging pods. And I'm going to say this too about Glamrock Freddy. I didn't put this in the video. I mentioned the story, but I didn't go into it. I didn't want to overinflate my theory. I just didn't want, there was a million things I could have said. I could have been writing for years, you know what I mean? But a really big component to Glamrock Freddy being solved for me is the very first Tales from the Pizzaplex story. And I think it's also very significant that it is the very first Tales from the Pizzaplex story. Frailty. Now, I have a whole video about Frailty that I think really does go into this a lot more, if that's something that interests you. But on the front, I just want to say before I say anything else, the reason that Frailty being the very first Tales from the Pizzaplex story is so significant is because that is not always the way that they structure the Tales series. For the first 2 or 3 books, the first story is not the title story. Tales from the Pizzaplex #1 is called Lally's Game, but the first story is Frailty. Meanwhile, later in the series, the first story is the title of the of the book. In my opinion, it's a very intentional thing for Frailty to be the first. I don't think that those are arbitrary. You could say, well, they just name the book whatever they think is the most interesting name, or whatever they wanted to do the cover art for, whatever they thought would be the most eye-catching cover art, things like that. Very true. But you can still order the stories however you want. So if they really were like, we want Lally's Game to be the thing, they want Frailty to set you up. They want Frailty to set you up for the entirety of Tales from the Pizzaplex. I'm going to say that again. They want Frailty to set you up for the entirety of Tales from the Pizzaplex. And it is a story entirely about Remnant. I think that's important. I can't separate myself from believing that to mean something. And in my video about it, I even go into how I find it so fascinating because, one, narratively, it's an excellent bridge from our last stories to our next ones, right? It's a really good bridge from Fazbear Frights to Tales from the Pizzaplex. Frailty involves the heart locket that is made with Remnant and has these healing properties, and is what is keeping Jessica, spoiler alert, it's what's keeping Jessica alive. And it has healing properties. It's one of those things that I'm like, if a capitalist entity got a hold of Remnant, would they not do exactly what they're doing? But to sum up the frailty discussion, the fact that we are introduced to Remnant in the very first Tales from the Pizzaplex story, to me, is interesting and important enough that we should think about it. And the fact that we are introduced to a character who is aware of the healing properties of it. Tales from the Pizzaplex is heavily focusing on Remnant in their very first story, and they're showing someone use it on other people, doing things with it, spreading it around. I think it's a good piece of evidence to suggest, because of all of the Tales games stuff conversation that is happening right now with Tiger Rock, or the Tiger plushie, and with the Edwin Murray hug vacuum, right? We need to be paying more attention to it, right? Like the idea of Remnant. Another thing that I think is like just a really strong, all by itself, component of this theory is the scooper room itself. I think that's very big. I think that something I would have liked to talk about more is the relation to sister location, because I really hardly talk about it, and it's a really big part of it, this scooping room. Now, again, that's something where it just didn't flow into my script without my script needing to be completely rewritten, and I didn't have, time constraints keep you from sitting there and going, well, I guess I gotta start over and restructure this entire script. At the end of the day, what I decided to do was include some sister location visuals and kind of go, you understand, that's a thing. And so there were a number of people in the comments who were going, isn't collecting Remnant like the entire point of sister location and things like that? And I'm like, yes, exactly. We've already done this in the series. And it's worth keeping in mind, assuming Tales Games is canon in its entirety, right? That Steve Snodgrass doesn't make any of the games that talk about Remnant. Those things are completely separate. So it's a lot more likely that the sister location scooping room and all that came along with it, the bunker, and everything that happens in Pizzeria Simulator is real, right? We have a lot more evidence to suggest now that both of those are not just games. We can look at the first 3 games, right, and say, okay, maybe those are the games that are in the continuity of the game's timeline now. Really meta, getting crazy up in here. But definitely not Sister Location and Pizzeria Simulator. And now in Security Breach and so on and so forth, we see the Pizzeria Simulator location. We see things that were inside of it, like Candy Cadet and Helpy, being implemented. I mean, Helpy is even implemented into the current iterations of the Pizzaplex, which is its own curious thing. But then, you keep going down, where theoretically the sister location bunker may very well have been, and we see a scooping room. It's very likely and very possible that Fazbear Entertainment would have gotten a hold of the blueprints. They would have been what Afton Robotics LLC, if Afton Robotics LLC is a component of Fazbear Entertainment, they would have absorbed that. So even if the blueprints weren't something that survived the fire, which is something that I suggest, they very well could have gotten their hands on them in another way. We don't know that the computer inside a Pizzeria Simulator is the only place those blueprints lived. So I want it to be very, very clear that the evidence points to this. It's really hard to suggest it as a question at this juncture, whether or not new Fazbear Entertainment is aware of and utilizing Remnant in some way. There is a scooping room that doesn't do anything else. And there is a little bitty part of me that goes, I guess you could suggest that that's not a scooper, but I disagree. I feel like even the texture file suggests that it is a scooper, but I don't know that off the top of my head. At the end of the day, I think that part of my theory isn't even a theory. I accept that the community is not going to just see what I'm saying as fact. There were a number of comments where people were saying, I don't know about the entire Pizzaplex, but I could definitely see the Glamrock animatronics being run off of Remnant. I don't know about the entire Pizzaplex, but I definitely see the Glamrock animatronics, and I go, that's enough. To me, look at this. It's so, it's one of those things that I'm going, did we not put that together? Like, did I miss the theory where someone goes, I'm going to talk about the ruins scooper, because why aren't we talking about it? I have to assume the reason that we're not having more conversations about it is because we are not certain if that's the canon ending of Ruin. But I want to pose that the end of Help, or the new update to Help Wanted 2, puts the Mimic in the game as a character we can like win and see, and he is in his costume that from the Scooper ending. It doesn't have to be confirmation to you, but to me that is a big nugget. That's a nugget of evidence. They're going, what you think? You think maybe the Scooper ending is the canon one? Because here he is. That's how I feel. At this point, this is true yapping, what I'm doing right now. But there is like, it's like I have a mission. There is something in me that's like, more people need to believe this. Every other theory I've ever made, you can believe it or you cannot believe it, and I'm not totally pressed one way or the other, but this, I am like, they're using Remnant in the Pizzaplex. It's not a question. You don't have to agree with me that it's the entire Pizzaplex. Hi, Zeke. Do you want to come up here? Okay. Zeke's gonna join me. You're probably not gonna see him though, because he just sits in my lap. To me, it's not a question of whether or not modern Fazbear Entertainment is using Remnant in the Pizzaplex. It more becomes, to what extent are they implementing Remnant into the Pizzaplex? Is this a matter of just injecting the Glamrock animatronics? Is this a matter of just Vanny using it to extract Remnant for her own personal weirdo goals? Or is it a lot more prevalent within the Pizzaplex than that? And my main piece of evidence for it being all over the place, used in a wide variety of ways, is the fact that these wet floor bots scream. When you are in the Vanny mask, right, the thing that should connect you more to the flip side, to the Remnant-based pieces of this, to that AR, VR thing, that's when you can hear the wet floor bots screaming. And it's children's screams, and they're in agony, right? They're in pain. They're not doing well. That is my biggest pointing to go, I don't think it's just the Glamrocks. Now, on the flip side of that, even, on the other hand, there are a number of wet floor bots that, upon deactivation, have an effect on Glamrock Bonnie. You know, his lights go out. Now, for gameplay purposes, you do have to deactivate every single wet floor bot to even get to the point where you see the other wet floor bots that are connected to Bonnie. To me, the Remnant is a more widespread situation. And I think if Tails is canon, it actually even makes a lot more sense for a lot of the other things going on in their Pizzaplex, is that these animatronics are kind of out of control because of the Remnant. Now, that being said, like I said earlier, AI is a huge component of this, and I don't want to take that away. I don't want to say Fazbear Entertainment is passing off Remnant-infused animatronics as AI. One, because the Mimic is a thing. It's not a question whether or not the Mimic is a thing, and his backstory, if not exactly the way that things are in the Tales from the Pizzaplex, is gonna be similar. It's gonna be a running parallel. And I do believe that the Mimic was programmed to do the mimicry stuff. And I do believe that it was programmed to learn the way that like a child learns. And in Help Wanted 2, we have games where we help the endoskeletons learn the way with the matching game that's supposed to be teaching them behaviors that they're supposed to do and not do. And we know that there is something going on with the code in the modern FNAF world because of Help Wanted 1, because of everything that Tape Girl says about the code and about that being corrupted in some way. I don't know that you would be able to see that as a programmer if that was not a part of it. If there wasn't a virus of some kind, I accept that, or some rogue AI, if you will. And it's doubled down on in Security Breach with the therapy CDs and Patient 46 and being told, like, these sets of subroutines and all these other things that are coding language. We know that there is a person, theoretically, in this series, whether it is Edwin or a parallel, that has created a really responsive AI. I don't know what the best way to say that is, but some kind of artificial intelligence has been created. And we know that coding and things like that is involved in some way. Now, if you asked me if I believed that Remnant could infect a circuit board in that way and carry that information and it would only know to manifest in that way in a computer, I would say yes. That's me. But it's a hard sell. So I won't try to. But if you ask me, I think Remnant could be responsible for all of it. Personally, I believe Remnant could be responsible for all of it. And I believe there's something very specific to be said. And FNAF, I went back and was watching FNAF theories because I thought I'd heard this before, and I was right. FNAF has made the point that the Mimic's backstory, specifically surrounding David, mirrors the puppet's behavior towards Charlie, wherein it is a very big possibility Remnant was formed, or if agony is at play, whatever. It's the game, it's the book, so we don't have to. This doesn't have to be specific to. It doesn't have to be. This isn't a fully thought out argument. This is just something that's been floating around in my head, and that's what these videos are for. So the idea that the Mimic is to David as the puppet is to Charlie, where David is sort of now within the Mimic, and thus would continue to act like David. Now, the Mimic is already programmed to do that, so it doesn't need this. This is an excess, okay? But if we're talking about an advanced AI that doesn't seem possible for its time, in my opinion, it creates a situation where Edwin would not be able to tell the difference between the Mimic pretending to be David and David attempting to communicate that his presence exists inside of this machine now, in a way that overcomplicates it. But at the end of the day, what we have then is a father beating his child in a roundabout way. And it would, create that sort of dark remnant, that would mimic, I don't have a better word for it, the idea of something having corrupted programming. Now, at the end of the day, I'm comfortable. I've talked about this in, I think, the last Nervous Breakdown, how difficult it is for me to accept that there are not supernatural elements at play anymore, but I can bring myself to that place. But all of that to say, I think there are a lot of little trails that you could follow to continue on this path, that Remnant could very well be at play in a lot of the aspects of this. But I don't need you to agree with that necessarily. All I need you to understand is that Remnant is being collected by Fazbear Entertainment and is being utilized in the Pizzaplex in some fashion. I think it's a lot more, but it may be a lot less. It is a shame that Sister Location didn't make its way more into the theory, but again, I just didn't have a good way to communicate about. I didn't have a good way to fit it into the script that I was already writing, right? That related to Return to the Pit and things like that. But I think it's worthwhile because a really big problem I have had with Sister Location for maybe the entirety of this franchise is the fact that the Funtime animatronics seem crazy advanced, ridiculously advanced for their time period, really wherever you place them. These animatronics are older, and yet they seem so advanced in their capabilities. And we know, right? And I've had this issue, but and somehow I kind of just missed it. But the fact that Remnant is a component, that's what makes them so advanced. It's not really Afton's ability to program animatronics, it's the Remnant. The Remnant is what makes them appear more lifelike. It's what gives them the power to move around. It's not this other stuff. Now, obviously they're still affected by electricity, right? And all those things, but why are they, we know they have this in them. And whether or not you believe remnant is soul juice, as I've seen some people describe it, or just those most extreme emotions and memories infused with metal, it has the same effect. It puts them in that place where they have an extra level of what seems like intelligence. And it is why they are ultimately able to organize, right? And we see a lot of those similar properties in the Glamrock animatronics, where they become unruly and not behaving the way that they are supposed to, right? Monty is getting violent. Chica is being gluttonous. Roxy is being just cruel, like a bully. And Glamrock Freddy is very emotional. They're taking on these human-like qualities that, while they can be explained by a sentient AI, it's worth exploring this element that has been certainly introduced to us and been made to be fairly important to the franchise. It can also have those same properties, and so it can be a mixture of these two things. And I even, in ways, am going, is the AI a red herring of it all? Is the AI component of this a red herring that kept us away from recognizing Remnant as the true source of all of this, of all these mishaps, or at least more of them than what we were initially looking at? And so I think that's all very important. And the last thing I want to talk about is something that at least one person brought up in the comments, but I think it was more than just one person, who asked me why I didn't talk about the tangle. Or wouldn't this explain the tangle? You didn't even talk about the tangle. I showed visuals of the tangle, or the blob for the uncultured, but the reason I didn't include it in the theory is because I just made a theory about the tangle recently. Within the last 2 videos, I think. I talked about the tangle in the Bobby Dots one. Yeah, I was like, yeah, the one with Cassie in the thumbnail. It's here. What am I talking about? I'm editing this. I just talked about the tangle and how it could be not Remnant or Agony or whatever. I talked about how it could not be supernatural. I had just talked about that. And so I was like, yeah, I don't know. In so many ways, I'm like, isn't that kind of a self-explanatory thing? And again, you can say no, you really should have said something, but it was another one of those instances where it just didn't, it wasn't a punch the same way that the speech that Glamrock Freddy gives is a punch. It's like a, look, he tells you that he came down here and was he found himself. He tells you this, and it was Vanny who did it, and everything else, or Vanessa, whatever, that, put this new life into him. It's just that's a punch. And saying and doesn't that explain the tangle? It doesn't feel like as much of a punch, because we've all kind of already agreed that the tangle is probably the main supernatural key that we have to the modern games. And I just said 2 weeks ago or something, as of recording this, that it could very well not be, and it could just be an AI program that has sentience because it has learned so much. If I'm telling you that the Pizzaplex is run on Remnant, I feel like you can get to the point where you go oh, and the tangle is probably then also Remnant. And people in the comments did, which to me proves that they can. But it's one of those things where I'm like, I really do wish that I'd been able to work it into the script. It would have just been one more thing. You know what I mean? It could have just been one more piece of evidence that I just threw in there. And I didn't. And so if I could write the theory again, I would put it in there. I just want that to be clear. If I could write the theory again, I'd talk about sister location more. If I could write the theory again, I'd go into frailty a little more. And if I could write the theory again, I would talk about the tangle. Sister location, the tangle, and frailty. Those are 3 components to the script that, again, I alluded to, but did not really go in on. And I think that they deserved more of a space in that theory, but because I spend a while kind of going into my thought process about the Vanny mask, again, I would have had to have gotten rid of all of that stuff. And I don't know if I could have. And still, I wouldn't have been able to meet the deadline, that's for sure. And so there's a part of me that's considered going back and just rewriting the same theory with a different storytelling voice to it. Just tell the same story in a different way, similar to Return to the Pit, and see if that catches on more, because the theory is not doing unwell by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm not about like clout about it. I'm just like I'm just so confident that I'm right, guys. I'm just like, more people need to hear this because it will help them. I don't know. That sounds nuts. I don't know. It makes me feel like that I'm thinking way too highly of myself, but I'm confident. The therapist CD where she's telling patient 46 that the body was mangled by machinery. We are scooping people. We're scooping people in the modern FNAF world, okay? It explains why a power draw would destroy the Pizzaplex. Let's really think about this. It explains why a power draw would create a sinkhole in the Pizzaplex if Remnant was infused to the Pizzaplex itself. Then of course, as there is a power draw, it starts to frailty. It starts to be beautiful. If Remnant is controlling so much of this, it makes sense why things are deteriorating. It makes sense why putting on the Vanny mask allows you to see an untouched place. There's so many things that fall into place when you get on board with me. And it's not narratively unsatisfying, and it's not just for the sake of narratively satisfying stuff. It's just working off of the information that we've already been given. And and a thing that I really wish that I'd been able to punch, but I couldn't figure out a way to put it in the script to make it punch, is that we are pushed so heavily towards the lightning bolt symbol. Towards the lightning bolt symbol, that energy symbol. That is on the power charging booths and on Glamrock Freddy. Why is Steel Wool pushing electricity, lightning? Now, I accept that it's like 80s and all this other stuff, but I need it to be understood. The lightning bolt could have got on anybody's chest. They put it on Glamrock Freddy's. They put it on Glamrock Freddy. It's the same lightning bolt that's in the charging booth. All those post-it notes that have the lightning bolt on them, that I know seem to be like part of a code, and I accept that, but like, what are we doing? Like, why are we being shown this lightning bolt in so many capacities if we're not supposed to think energy, power, electricity? When we're playing Ruin, we're, doing all this stuff with the power, right? Gregory's freaking out about the power, I'm sorry, but like we're asked to pay attention to it too much to be ignoring it. And I'm like, I don't, it's like I don't need my theory to have millions of views or anything like that. I accept it, but I'm like, I'm like this is important information. Like, have you or a loved one ever suffered from mesothelioma? You could be entitled to financial compensation. Like, you need to watch this ad and get this number down and remember it in case you need it. Like, that's where I'm at with this. Like, I know that sounds ridiculous. I feel like I sound like a nut job, but I'm like, again, I rarely have clarity. I so often am clouded by doubt and this feeling of, you're probably wrong about this. And in this specific instance, I am not. That has to count for something. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to be going into the chat on the live video that I'm doing right now for my channel members only and seeing if they have been asking me questions. They've been sitting here patiently with me this entire time and throwing their questions into the chat when they have one. So we're gonna do that. We're gonna do that now. So the first question is from Queen Kira, and it's, do you think a possible area Agony is experimented with is the upgrade station in Security Breach where we upgrade Glamrock Freddy? And if so, could that potentially damage the shell in the same way as a charging station? What I will say first is when I was trying to figure out why the heck Glamrock Freddy gets so bleh, one of the theories that has been posed is that it's because we're adding the other Glamrock's corrupted pieces to Freddy, but there's actually not a direct correlation. He does start to get funky before that, but the charging station, did I say that in the theory? I don't even think I put this in the theory, but the very first time that we see Freddy not okay, is after we are in the charging station and we see Vanny for the first time. Now, Glamrock Freddy doesn't see Vanny, but we do. And it is after we exit that charging pod in that moment that he starts to be funky. So that's where I was connecting it to the charging pod. Anyway, more to your question, don't those little areas kind of look like little scooping rooms? It's a really interesting thought, and I would have to say yes. I don't want to speak super definitively about like exactly how I would imagine Remnant being experimented on in that place. And I know you said agony. I'm just going to keep saying Remnant because we haven't been given agony as a specific substance that's being used in the game's timeline. There were people who commented who were, I think specifically someone said it's silly to say that Remnant is a part of the game's timeline, but agony isn't. And I don't disagree necessarily entirely, but there is a level of me that goes, yeah, we have to be careful with our words. We can't be flippant with the terminology that the books have given us and the games have given us because it's not that cut and dry. And I don't want to discount what I'm saying by being uncareful, right? I don't want to be reckless. So yes, I definitely think that that could be a component of the Remnant experimentation. And it could be a reason why when he comes out of those experiment stations, sometimes he looks more decrepit than when he went in. But it isn't the first place we see him getting more decrepit. So that's that. Let's move on to the next one. This isn't a question, but this is a comment that I got on the video a couple of times and I'm seeing it now. Riley B. Criley is saying, harvesting agony explains the shreddy Faz chair from the movie. Why else would anyone create a device like that to shred people up? And I made a theory about Michael and Vanessa from the movie specifically, talking about what it would look like if Vanessa is a robot. There's another video I talk about with Vanessa in it that I'm going to try to put here. And in that video, or in those videos, at some point, I talk about Vanessa being a robot and needing Remnant to survive. I basically, to some, said that like William Afton would need to continuously collect Remnant for Vanessa and uses that to lord over her. Like the moment that I stop injecting you with Remnant, you die kind of energy. And I feel like I mentioned specifically that that chair would have been a power source, as well as the Ella doll. It's basically a scooper is kind of what I feel like I said, or what at least what I was thinking if I didn't actually put it in the theory. Because I can definitely see myself going, oh, I think that's what that was. And then going, I'm not going to put that in the theory because people are just going to laugh at me and I don't feel like dealing with it today. iPizza has asked, I wonder if Fazbear Entertainment was using the ruined scooper for something else before Vanessa/Glitchtrap took over. The missing residents seem to be a more recent development. That's a good question. It's interesting because you do have to sort of go off the timeline of, well, we know Vanessa started at the Pizzaplex early because it seems like her job reassignment happened around the same time. I don't know, it's interesting because how long has the Pizzaplex been open? The thing that FNAF is the worst about is just how much time has passed between point A and point B at any given time. We are not given enough information about the amount of time that has passed, like ever. It's a worthwhile thought to go, how long have they been using? Have they been using Remnant the entire time? My presumption was that yes, because the scooping room is well established down there. Anyway, the other thing I was gonna say was, you said the missing residence seems to be more of a recent development. My thought process was less that like a lot of people went missing quickly, and more that like people have been going missing over time and the circumstances are so similar that it's become a thing, you know? Kind of like how they capture like a serial killer. That's like a dark topic to go to. We don't know where this person is. We don't know necessarily what's happening, but we can assume that they're all the same person because of the conditions. I hope that makes sense. I'm thinking they're getting to a point where they're like, all these local residents have gone missing around the same time or under the similar circumstances or, something like that. So this question comes from either Jeter or Gadar. I hope that I'm not butchering your name, but could the Vanny Mask be powered by Remnant and letting us look into the flip side? That would explain some similarities of Ruin with FNAF World. This thought led me to the same theory a while ago. Yeah, that is my understanding of what the Vanny Mask is. The Oof Troop was on a podcast with Rytos, and I did a reaction to it because I was like, oh, this person, like the Oof Troop and I agree about the way the Vanny Mask taps you into the flip side. They made a graphic kind of showing the different layers of like what all of this is, but I'm in agreement. Or at the very least, like, yeah, your thought process makes a lot of sense to me. If Remnant is everything, and Remnant is a metal, if Remnant can be infused into like the circuitry of a game and things like that, there's metal there, right? So if these tragic events are happening around these arcade machines, we see all these 8-bit mini games and things like that that have these supernatural freaky properties to them. It almost seems like I can see a world again where like Remnant is infusing those like memories, those dark memories into its own program or into its own game. Someone says, does Mike need to keep sourcing Remnant/Agony to keep living then? Like how Glam Freddy needs to keep recharging? I don't know. That's a really big question. Is that the vampire of it all? When we think about, like what a vampire has to do to stay alive, it has to keep killing. It has to keep killing or it will starve and die. So is that Mike? Is that where he's at? It's a very good question. It's a very good question. I don't think I have an answer. One, it would depend on what the difference is between an animatronic and like a human being infused with Remnant, because it's like Mike's situation is very specific where he's infused with Remnant as a person, his body. So it would depend on the different effects that has. I think that if you were going to poke a hole in my theory, I think that might be one. If Mike just gets injected with Remnant one time and he's good, that might be one where, if Mike doesn't have to keep, but we just don't know enough about what happens with Mike. I don't think we know enough about what happens with Mike between the time that he comes back, and is no longer inhabited by Innard, and the time that he goes to the Pizzaplex and does the pizzeria and does all that. And that may be the reason that he wants to die, is because he knows that if he wants to stay alive, he will have to continue infusing himself with Remnant. So those are all the questions that we'll take today. I really appreciate everybody who was available for the live stream that I did for my channel members, but also, I'm really just grateful for you. If you are watching this, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much for being a part of the Nervous Breakdown. If you would like to be a part of the Nervous System, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Like the video if you enjoyed it. And if you want to become a channel member to be there for the next time, then all it is $1. So it's totally up to you. Now, what I'd love for you to do is, as you have witnessed me yap about, I would love if you'd go down into the comments and yap amongst yourselves. I'll be down there replying to people as I can, as I want to, as it is. But I would love it if you would leave your thoughts in the comments below. I upload videos every week and go live on most Wednesdays and Fridays, but if you can't wait, there are videos on the screen right now just for you. Okay, bye! Okay. Let me get back in my head.